My daughter Xingxing had just dictated the menu for the guests, and I ordered the signature spicy chicken, still feeling more like a boyfriend than a father, but still mentally praising her for her quick thinking. The door suddenly swung open, letting in a waft of cold, expensive perfume into the stuffy room, and my ex-wife Liu Ruyan in her incredible denosometer heels confidently stepped inside, throwing me back 5 years. The formal black suit fit her perfectly, and she would surely have recognized me the moment I opened my mouth. After all, it was I Gu Wanchuan who took Xingxing to that Michelin-starred gem of a restaurant and then simply recreated their recipe from memory in my own kitchen. You voluntarily threw away that treasure 5 years ago, Liu Ruyan, so why are you now looking at my pot where the spicy chicken drips with fragrant fat? I distinctly heard Xingxing's soft, milky, childish voice at the door. Hello, auntie, how old are you? And this little girl, only 5 years old, was once again acting like a little adult. After all, she'd snuggled up to me every day after kindergarten, helped me plan the menu in the kitchen, washed the dishes, and even gently nudged me under the table with her feet, and I so badly wanted to praise her. But then I heard the voice of the newcomer. She was as cold as a block of ice, like a random stranger in the smoky half-light of a cheap diner. Where is your father? The ladle froze heavily in my hand. I felt like I was stuck inside my own red-hot cauldron where the heat burned my skin, but I barely felt any pain anymore, and when I looked up, she was standing right in front of me, exactly 5 years after our last meeting. I sincerely thought that our meeting in this life would never happen again, but there she was, standing on the threshold of my modest restaurant in an impeccable black suit. Her waist was still as thin as ever, and her hair, gathered into a neat bun, seemed dazzlingly white. White, 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 white. White, 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 white. White, 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 white. There was a pounding in my ears until my hoarse voice finally squeezed out, "What are you doing here?" returning me to the nightmare of 5 years ago. All the events of that night flashed before my eyes like a movie. The hotel hallway, her sudden fall into my arms, the smell of expensive alcohol in her strange, glassy eyes, and then her unexpected visit, the words about a sudden pregnancy, the doctor's conclusion about my rare physiological structure and the risk of remaining childless forever. She simply dropped a note on my door with 5 words. "You will raise this child," and walked away, leaving me, a green student with a measly 1,000 yuan in my pocket, huddled in a tiny room, barely making ends meet. For the sake of a crumb, I opened this diner, subsisting on noodles and spicy rice, putting my daughter to bed right in the kitchen nook, where she meekly waited for me for 5 years, silently enduring all the hardships of our impoverished life. No outsider would dare to take her away from me, but Liu Ruyan's heavy gaze had already slid behind me, where the little star was hiding. At first, something resembling softness flickered in her eyes, but the cold instantly froze her features again as she glanced around at the peeling walls, the dirty pots on the tables, and the plastic baskets in the corner. This pampered princess looked displeased, as if she'd come to inspect an abandoned pet, reapplying her lipstick only to deign to inspect my pitiful existence, and I couldn't help but grin, squeezing my eyes shut tighter before this pompous Mrs. Liu. Rumor had it that the new office building in Chengdu was entirely hers, and it was no surprise that such an influential young president of the powerful Liu Corporation found time to visit me, since even the old king of the New Yan Hotel trembled before her strict personnel management style. I felt taut until my daughter tugged at the hem of my robe. Xingxing quietly asked, "Dad, who is this auntie? Did she come for a bite to eat?" I, not daring to reveal the truth, gently stroked her head. "She's an old friend of Daddy's." "Xingxing, go to Grandpa Zhang's for some sweet and sour spare ribs, okay?" The little girl, despite her childish curiosity, obediently nodded and immediately ran out of the room. Meanwhile, as per schedule, regular customers, led by retiree Uncle Zhang, dropped into the shop. He came here every day for a bowl of homemade noodles, and Xingxing invariably treated him to sweets. Uncle Zhang looked at Liu Ruyan carefully and, lowering his voice, whispered to me, "Wang Chuan, who is this gorgeous young lady?" She looked out of place here, like a painting from another era that had accidentally found its way into our shabby walls. "Don't be silly, Uncle Zhang, I only have room in my heart for Xingxing," I replied quietly. This girl clearly didn't belong to our circle. Her impeccable outfit hinted at the capital's chic of Changxian, but Liu Ruyan pointedly ignored everyone around her. She confidently chose a table, threw her designer bag on the next chair, and stared straight at me. "I'll have a portion of spicy chicken and tomatoes with egg," she said, and I stood there, neither alive nor dead, remembering how 5 years ago she had thrown a child out of her life in exactly the same way, and now she had come to me for food, as if she were the mistress of the situation. Our store is actually closed today, I thought, but I couldn't bring myself to throw her out right in her face. "Come on, I'm cold, although no, it's not that cold outside." Uncle Zhang looked back and forth between me and the guest, confused. "Wang Chuan, my son, what's going on? Grandpa Li and I haven't finished eating yet, and the guest seems to be sitting quietly, not making any noise." Gritting my teeth until my jaws hurt, I muttered, "Okay, wait," and turned sharply, disappearing into the kitchen. There, Xingxing was already waiting for me, her face flushed with joy, holding in her hands the treasured sweet and sour spare ribs that Papa and Grandpa Zhang had praised in every possible way. I patted her head, feeling how everything inside me was clenching with pain for this child, whom I had never asked about her mother, remembering only that long-ago day in kindergarten. Then the teacher asked her about her mother, and my daughter came running to me in tears, asking, "Daddy, where did my mom go?" To which I replied, "You have a dad, and a dad is better than any mom," barely holding back my own tears. Immediately, with hands shaking with excitement, I placed a plate of spicy chicken and eggs in front of Liu Ruyan and wanted to leave silently, but she called out to me. "How have you been all these years, Star?" Her voice was quieter than before, and a hint of genuine emotion flickered in her eyes. "But the main thing is that you're okay." Without turning around, I snapped, "Eat and go, and never come here again, Liu Ruyan." Her voice was harsh and final. "I am Star's mother, and I have a legal right to see my daughter," and everything inside me sank. "Daddy, who is this?" Xingxing's frightened voice rang out from behind me, standing by the door with a rag in her hands, her eyes wide with confusion. Liu Ruyan's gaze fixed on the girl, and her expression softened for a moment, so much so that she tried to touch the child's head, but Xingxing took a frightened step back, hiding behind me and clutching my clothes with her fingers. "Daddy, is she my real mother?" Xingxing asked quietly, her trembling voice a mixture of timid hope and animal fear of the inevitable, because I knew how much she dreamed of a mother, looking at the other children in the kindergarten. Before, I always answered children's questions with a story about how mom just went out for sweets and would definitely return when my daughter grew up. But now this mother was really standing in front of us, and I had no idea how to explain this to a child. Liu Ruyan silently looked at the girl hiding behind me, then slowly lowered her hand, returned to the chair, and taking her chopsticks, silently sent a piece of spicy fillet into her mouth, continuing to chew with a stony face. The customers in the room clearly sensed something was wrong, and Uncle Zhang, coughing heavily, rose from the table. "Well, Wang Chun, since you have family matters to attend to, we'll probably be going. See you tomorrow." Grandpa Li immediately supported him. Yes, we won't disturb you. Star, Grandma will be back tomorrow." Little Star nodded quietly, bidding farewell to the old customers who filed out of the room. In the ensuing silence of the small restaurant, only me, my daughter, and Liu Ruyan, who was finishing her lunch, remained. She slowly put down her chopsticks, took her wallet out of her expensive bag, pulled out several crisp 100-ruble bills, and demonstratively placed them on the table. "I don't need your handouts, take the money and get out of here," I said, pushing the bills back. She didn't care about the money. She stared at me with a cold, assessing gaze, shifting from me to Xingxing, pressed against my knees, waiting for my word. I understood perfectly well that Liu Ruyan was no longer the girl from the past. 5 years ago, she could easily have been suppressed by her own relatives, but now she is the absolute president of the Liu Corporation, owning billions and all the levers of influence on the world. My chances in this fight for the child might have been slim, but I wasn't going to lose, not for the world. "Xingxin," I sighed heavily. Stroking my daughter's hair, I gently maneuvered. "Honey, go to the utility room for now. Or sit in the corner with your toys, okay? Dad will talk to this woman for a bit and then come see you right away." Xingxing, with a sense of foreboding, obediently disappeared behind the kitchen door, leaving me alone with my ex-wife. A heavy, stifling silence hung in the air of the tiny hall. "So what do you want from us this time?" I sat down on the chair opposite her, trying to speak as calmly as possible while Liu Ruyan stared at me with her icy gaze. I was silent for a few seconds, my mouth slightly open, because exactly 5 years ago everything was completely different. I had no intention of abandoning Xingxing back then. It was just that my half-sister Liu Jiru drugged me that night, making both you and I pawns in her game, and later, when I became pregnant, she forced me to give birth just to ensure that her own son would inherit the entire corporation, leaving me with no other choice. I could only trust Xingxing to you, and now I've come back to take her back, but I had no idea about such details, digesting what I heard in silence and understanding perfectly well how hard it was for her back then. However, all these excuses don't change for a second the cruel fact that she simply abandoned tiny Xingxing for 5 long years, and I don't give a damn about all your past family feuds. I look her straight in the eyes. Xingxing is my grown-up, long-suffering daughter who has nothing to do with you, and no matter how much power and money is concentrated in your hands now, I will not allow anyone to take my child away from me by force, to which Liu Ruyan only dryly replies, "And I never intended to take her from you by force." Liu Ruyan frowned slightly and added quietly, I just want to be there, to be a little involved in her life, and to fulfill all her childhood wishes." I laughed bitterly in her face. "How are you even going to make up for those lost 5 years? Where were you when Xingxing was seriously ill at night? Where were you hiding when she took her first shaky steps? Where were you on that terrible day when she went to kindergarten for the first time and cried inconsolably, loudly calling for her mother?" And my voice breaks into a scream. My chest is seething with both the burning resentment and the furious anger of a person who has had to replace both a father and a mother for a child all this time, while she declares her intention to close all the gaps from 5 years ago at once, which makes Liu Ruyan's face instantly turn white. Her lips tremble silently in an attempt to object, but in the end she simply silently lowers her gaze. At this tense moment, Xingxing's frightened voice comes from the kitchen. "Dad, a bowl of chicken fell, can you come and help me?" And I immediately jump up, telling Liu Ruyan, "Sit here," and hurriedly heading to the utility room where my daughter is squatting fearfully among the shards. Noticing the scattered pieces, I see her pouting lips and childish resentment. I immediately sit down next to her to collect the food, and the little girl suddenly hugs me tightly around the neck and whispers, "Daddy, for some reason this woman in the suit scares me, she's so icy." I gently pat her on the back, reassuring her, "Don't be afraid, Daddy is nearby. If Xingxing doesn't want to look at her, we'll let her in the doorway, okay?" To which my daughter nods hesitantly and then shakes her head thoughtfully, as if reasoning like an adult. But if she suddenly turns out to be my real mother, I'd probably want to see her, even though I'm a little afraid, and this unchildish understanding once again breaks my heart. Liu Ruyan was still sitting at the table in the empty hall, where the 100 yuan she had left behind was still white on the table, and when I left the kitchen, she silently stood up, but I only coldly threw after her, "Leave today and never come back here again." But she demonstratively ignored me and resolutely headed for the kitchen door. Looking inside the room, she said loudly enough for her daughter to hear, "Star, Mom will definitely come to you tomorrow and bring your favorite strawberry cake, okay?" To which a timid, quiet child's voice came from the depths, "Okay." After which Liu Ruyan silently turned and left, leaving us in the deafening silence of the empty store. I looked in confusion, first at the money left on the table, then at my daughter who was quietly playing with her toys, fully understanding that this woman would not give up so easily and would show up again tomorrow, and obviously with much more serious intentions. Resolutely taking out my phone, I found in my old address book the contact information of my old university friend Lao Chen, who had long ago graduated as a lawyer, and sighing heavily after a second of hesitation, I pressed the call button. "Hello, Lao Chen, hi, it's me, Gu Wanchuan." The cheerful voice of an old friend immediately rang out on the line. "Wang Xuan, old man, how many years have passed? What brought you here?" To which I choked out, my voice breaking, "I really need your professional help. It's about securing full custody of the child." Before I could finish speaking, the doorbell rang sharply at the entrance. I looked up and was stunned. Liu Ruyan was standing on the threshold, holding that very money in her hands, and a mortal threat was frozen in her icy eyes. "Who are you talking to on the phone here?" The phone was still pressed tightly to my ear, transmitting the lawyer's puzzled silence. Chen's worried voice continued to come through the speaker. "Wanchuan, are you there? What happened?" My hands instantly began to sweat with fear, and I frantically hid the gadget behind my back, terrified not of her, but of the fact that this confrontation would actually reach the courts and rob me of my purpose in life. Liu Ruyan slowly stepped inside, her heavy gaze never leaving me. Her high heels clicked loudly on the white tiled floor at the entrance, and her eyes glittered like shards of broken ice as she muttered, "Gu Wanchuan, don't even think about looking for any lawyers." "It's none of your business who I'm looking for or why," I snapped, quickly burying my nose in the screen and threw to my friend, "Lao Chen, I'll call back later," and hung up, feeling the smartphone red hot from the tension burning my palm. My own heartbeat was thundering in my ears as she strode confidently up to the counter and tossed the ill-fated 100 yuan back into the iron cash register box. There was no point in arguing with her. She wouldn't take the money anyway, which meant she'd come back here again with her rules. At that moment, Xingxing's quiet voice came from behind the half-open door. "Daddy, you're not angry, are you? I really didn't mean to do this." And those words, soft and vulnerable as a feather, mercilessly wounded my soul again, because the child still desperately needed a mother's love, no matter what. She would be back again tomorrow morning, there was no doubt about that. She'll probably show up with a bunch of expensive gifts and the intention of taking the child shopping for new clothes herself. Turning sharply on her heels, she headed for the exit. My gaze accidentally fell on my own hand, where a large red spot from a splash of hot oil, received just a couple of minutes ago, was adorning the skin and was now burning with hellish flames. I froze in place, unable to even come to my senses, until her silhouette had already disappeared into the darkening alley, where a cold autumn breeze blew, bringing with it a strange mixture of loneliness and chilly warmth, forcing me to take a step back and listen to the monotonous hum of the refrigerator in the empty hall. I trudged wearily into the kitchen, where my little star was already fast asleep right at the table, clutching in her hand a half-eaten cookie I had given her during the day. This little one was so smart and understanding that she never got capricious, knowing how exhausted I was at the stove. Picking up the baby in my arms, I was surprised at how light, like a feather, she seemed, and my daughter sleepily pressed her cheek to my chest and barely audibly murmured, "Daddy, Mommy, cake," which almost brought tears to my eyes, and I very carefully laid her down in a small pink crib. I bought her this crib exactly a year ago, personally covering the sides with cheerful stickers of bunnies. Before, she always asked to sleep with me, but recently she suddenly said, "Daddy, I'm already big, I want to sleep in my own crib." Although I understood the real reason perfectly well, she simply saw how hard it was for me to get up in the morning after my shift, and she tried to let me get enough sleep. After sitting for another half hour at her bedside in the semi-darkness, I felt completely exhausted, and thoughts of lawyers and the hopelessness of legal prospects against an influential corporation burned inside me, forcing me to finally open a chat with Chen on the messenger, and with the bitter realization of my own poverty, close the application. I simply didn't have the money for serious lawyers, not to mention the confrontation with an entire army of her bodyguards. The next morning, I woke up sharp at 6, long before Xingxing had even opened her eyes, and went straight to the bustling morning market to buy fresh produce, where autumn was always bustling with activity and the loud cries of the vendors could be heard. The local vegetable vendor spotted me from afar and called out loudly, "Xiaogu, are you back for spare ribs for your daughter today? You brought the freshest." But as soon as I'd paid for the greens and choice strawberries, a familiar, cold voice rang out from behind me, "Gu Wanchuan." Turning around, I saw Liu Ruyan, wearing a simple light gray casual dress, not as formal as yesterday, but still completely out of place among the fish and vegetable aisles, holding a signature pink bag of baby clothes. "What are you doing here?" I said, frowning and trying to leave, but she followed me, glancing casually at the street stall selling hot breakfasts where we had once stopped after a night at a hotel, when she had first timidly asked me about fried dough sticks, and there hadn't been that icy shell in her eyes yet. When we returned home, we found Xingxing, who had just woken up, sitting on the bed in her pajamas and sleepily rubbing her eyes, quietly muttering, "Daddy, is Mommy awake?" While Liu Ruyan confidently walked into the room, taking out a luxurious white princess dress and miniature leather shoes from a pink bag and saying, "Mommy bought you a new outfit, try it on, baby." Xingxing looked at me with confusion. I nodded slightly, and my daughter timidly approached her, allowing me to squat down and carefully help her change her clothes. Liu Ruyan's movements were unusually gentle and tremulous, completely at odds with her tough character, and Xingxing, shyly hiding her hands in the sleeves of her new dress, whispered enthusiastically, "Mom, it's so beautiful." And at that moment their faces seemed strikingly similar to me. Standing in the doorway, I felt a dull pain squeezing everything inside me. Looking at this idol, so similar to a scene from the life of an ordinary happy family, I clearly understood the falseness of what was happening, because no beautiful dress in the world can fill the 5-year void of orphanhood. Liu Ruyan immediately suggested taking Xingxing to have breakfast at a nearby cafe. I nervously agreed to accompany them, choosing for the trip the familiar establishment of Old Man Zhang. Uncle Zhang cast a long, appraising glance at our strange trio and, leaning towards me, quietly asked, "Wangchuan, my son, is this really the very mother of our little star?" My heart was so heavy that I could barely breathe, while Liu Ruyan ordered a serving of crispy dough sticks with warm soy milk for Xingxing. She took the traditional tofu brain soup for herself, not forgetting to whisper to Old Man Zhang to add more hot spices, remembering very well my eating habits from 5 years ago, while Xingxing devoured the treat with gusto. Suddenly, the girl looked up at her mother with big, trusting eyes and asked directly, "Mom, why didn't you come to me earlier?" causing Liu Ruyan to convulsively squeeze the porcelain spoon in her fingers. She looked up at me guiltily and then answered her daughter softly, "Mom was very busy with adult work, dear, so she didn't have time, but now I will come to you every day, I promise," which made Xingxing's face light up with a happy, shining smile. "Will Mommy now live with us and Dad?" the girl blurted out with bated breath, and Liu Ruyan, beating me to it, firmly answered, "Yes, when Mommy finishes all her chores, we will all live together." To which I threw a fierce, furious look at her, but she didn't even deign to answer me, calmly continuing to eat her breakfast. Liu Ruyan said she wanted to take Xingxing to the amusement park, but I immediately declined, reminding her that the store was opening today and I needed to be there. However, I promised to close up shop for the day and, with a sigh, picked up the phone and dialed Wangchuan to give him an unscheduled day off at my expense, then hung up. She looked at me with a victorious look and said, "Now you can get ready, you don't have a choice anyway, and I can only go with you." After which we found ourselves among the ringing laughter of children in the amusement park. Xingxing happily grabbed Liu Ruyan's hand and squealed with delight that she wanted to ride the train, and her companion followed her with a soft smile, managing to look completely warm and cozy even while riding. Having settled down in front of Liu Ruyan in the amusement carriage, she leaned towards me and said, "Gu Wanchun, just look how happy our girl is." But I remained silent, feeling how with each new radiant look from Xingxing, my heart was squeezed with anxiety. After all, the closer she became to Liu Ruyan, the more terrible it was to think about a possible separation in the future. At noon, Liu Ruyan took us to a decent Western restaurant, where Xingxing saw steak for the first time and poked at it with a fork, confused, not knowing how to handle it, until Liu Ruyan carefully cut the meat into neat pieces, saying, "Eat slowly, my dear," to which the little girl quietly replied, "Thank you, mommy." In the midst of dinner, Liu Ruyan suddenly started talking about marriage, causing the knife in my hand to shake, the first drop of sauce to fall onto the snow-white tablecloth, and Xingxing to freeze, looking back and forth in confusion. Thinking I'd misheard, I asked her again, but she repeated it with a completely serious expression on her face, as if she were offering not a person's fate, but a purchase of groceries. Did she really think that in this way Xingxing would suddenly have a normal home, and that I would be able to forgive her everything? I lost my temper and abruptly refused her right to her face, reminding her that 5 years ago we were just a meaningless coincidence, and now she suddenly decided to talk about marriage for show or to take the child. She didn't care about my feelings and cynically stated that she remembered the past perfectly well, but a child needs both parents, and if I became stubborn then she will continue to push her line through the courts, cynically asking, "Do I seriously expect the judge to give the girl to the owner of a squalid eatery with no prospects, and not to a mother who can provide her with a comfortable future?" Her words cut to the quick because deep down I understood the bitter truth. I had no savings, no housing, no car, only a cramped kitchen, while she could give Sinsin absolutely everything and any judge would side with her. I tried to object with a trembling voice, reminding her that Sinsin was attached to me and that I was more than just a guardian to her. She immediately retorted that she had no intention of separating us and wanted only one thing: for us to finally live as one full-fledged family under the roof of our common home. Liu Ruyan gently added that she knew how hard it had been for me over the past 5 years and admitted her own mistakes, offering to correct the past through this marriage, but I only smiled bitterly in response. How exactly was she going to make up for the years of loneliness, sleepless nights, and childhood tears under the stars when the little girl called for her mother, and there was only silence in response? Xingxing's quiet, frightened voice interrupted the heated argument. "Daddy, please don't be angry." "Mommy, don't argue with Dad," the girl chimed in, causing Liu Ruyan to immediately grab a napkin. She quickly wiped away the child's tears and calmed her down in a gentle voice, saying that no one was crying and the parents weren't arguing at all, after which she looked sternly at me. There was a clear warning in her gaze, and she said, "Stop scaring the child's soul, let's go home and we'll discuss everything calmly there." I sighed heavily, my heart fading from the inside, and hugged Xingxing tightly, who had already experienced and cried too much that day. Later in the evening, Liu Ruyan dropped us off back at the store, where there was a sign on the door that said "closed for personal reasons," which, at my request, the assistant left in charge was supposed to put up that morning. Before leaving, she said briefly, "I'll do it again this evening, think about it carefully," and left, leaving me on the threshold with mixed feelings. Sitting in the semi-darkness of the closed room with Xingxing on my lap, I quietly asked her, "Baby?" To which she naively asked if I really didn't want my mother to stay with us and for us to live as a real, complete family, making me freeze from the weight of my internal choice. The thought that Xingxing would have a mother and they would finally stop huddling together pierced me with melancholy, but I remained silent, and soon the voices of Uncle Zhang and Aunt Li, who had come to visit us, were heard outside the door. Noticing the lowered blinds, they started knocking, and I opened the door for them, and the neighbors from the threshold asked where the girl's mother was, to which I silently placed cups of water in front of them. Aunt Li sat down opposite and began to sing her song about justice, reminding him that no matter what his mother had been like in the past, she had returned and was proposing a legal marriage. She convinced me to stop being stubborn and think about the girl's future, because raising her alone is difficult for a man, and help from an influential woman would not be superfluous. I understood their practical logic in my head, but my wounded heart could not forgive that very note and the pain of 5 years ago when I was left alone with a baby in my arms. However, the predictions came true, and late in the evening Liu Ruyan actually appeared on the doorstep again. In her hands were bags of gourmet food from an expensive restaurant, exactly what Xingxing loved so much. After quickly feeding the baby, she took me aside for a final conversation. "Well, have you thought this through carefully?" she asked straight to the point. I smiled bitterly and asked if she was really ready to drag me through the courts, to which she replied without a trace of a smile, "I don't want to bring it to that." Her gaze left no choice. She was not going to give me Xingxing just like that. "Gu Wanchuan, I know how much you hate me, but can't you take a step forward for the sake of our daughter?" she said softly. I looked at her, then at the girl gobbling up chicken legs and looking trustingly at me with her bright eyes, full of childish hope. Everything inside me collapsed from the realization of the hopelessness of the situation. I understood that I simply would not survive separation from my daughter, and even marriage to a man I didn't love seemed like the lesser evil. So through clenched teeth I squeezed out a dry, "I agree." Liu Ruyan froze for a second in surprise, and then a slight, barely noticeable smile of a winner touched her lips. Without giving me time to come to my senses, she immediately announced that tomorrow morning we were going to the city to submit the documents, and I just looked on distantly as she put the child to bed. All evening I felt a terrible emptiness in my chest, not knowing whether I was taking the right step, but for the sake of peace, Sinsin was ready to overcome himself. Having cleared the remains of dinner from the table, I saw off Zai Mu, who had dropped in briefly and who, as a parting gesture, promised to pick me up in the morning in his best suit. Left alone, I bathed my daughter, who was tired from the day, put her to bed, and went out into the empty store with a pack of cigarettes, taking drags again and again in the thick smoke. Taking out my phone, I opened the conversation with Lao Chen and instead of a long explanation, sent just 3 short words: "Everything is cancelled." After sitting like that until dawn, until the gray light of early morning began to appear outside the window, I took out an old college shirt from the closet, which now fit me tightly. I had barely managed to change my clothes when there was a delicate knock on the door. Liu Ruyan stood at the threshold, wearing an elegant light dress and neat makeup, handing me a branded bag with an expensive suit and saying, "Try it on, I bought you new clothes." Sleepy Xingxing immediately ran out of the room after Li Jian and, noticing the guest, excitedly shouted, "Mommy has come." Liu Ruyan helped the little girl get dressed, promising to take her to the best children's store in the city, and the 3 of us went outside. There was a luxurious black sedan parked near the curb, far more impressive than anything I had seen before, and while Xingxing enthusiastically pressed herself against the front window, I silently sat in the back seat, feeling like an outsider at this party of life. Liu Ruyan took the ticket in line without further ado, and soon the photographer commanded us to stand closer to the mirror and smile, while I pressed myself against her, holding her hand tightly, slightly tilting my head and forcing a smile for the camera, while Xingxing settled right between us. I tried to force out a joyful laugh, and at that moment the flash flashed blindingly, capturing us in the picture exactly as a happy, complete family, although only I knew what an abyss lay behind it. Behind the outward image of well-being lurked a deep resentment and complete helplessness that lurked in the soul immediately after receiving the coveted stamp. Liu Ruyan solemnly handed me the marriage certificate. From that moment, we officially became husband and wife, but the realization that I was married weighed heavily on me. Looking at this document, I felt like a stone, not a living person, who now had to go and see our new home. She suddenly broke the silence with an offer to evaluate the purchase, and when I asked again, stunned, she explained that she had bought a spacious villa in the western part of the city, where we would now live and where Xingxing would have her own huge room, leaving me speechless from such pressure. Xingxing immediately enthusiastically bombarded her with questions about the size of the villa and whether it had a swimming pool, to which Liu Ruyan answered affirmatively with a smile. Adding that she would definitely teach the girl to swim as soon as she wanted, Liu Ruyan looked at the little girl affectionately, and I just nodded silently, agreeing to go to Chengxi. Before, I had only seen places like this on television. The endless green lawns and artificial ponds seemed like a completely different world compared to that squalid old alley where I spent my lonely life. Inside, the house was impressive in its scale. A huge crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling of the living room, and a spiral staircase led to the second floor, where Liu Ruyan immediately began leading the child in search of a better bedroom. While considering options with her companion, Xingxing ran up and down the floors until she finally settled on a bright room with its own balcony. Noticing a small, neat table there, the girl joyfully exclaimed that she liked this little room, and I just gently patted her on the head, answering that the main thing was her own comfort. At that moment, 3 neatly dressed women in uniform appeared in the hallway, whom Liu Ruyan introduced as the elder sister Zhang and assistant Lei, hired to manage our new life, noticing the embarrassment on the faces of me and the little one. Seeing our confusion, Liu Ruyan hid me behind her back and handed me a heavy key to the front door, offering to keep it for herself, and in response to my statement about my intention to continue operating the restaurant. She immediately interrupted me, but noticing my expression, she stopped herself and nodded softly, promising to find a couple of reliable workers to help me so that I wouldn't have to strain myself alone, although I remained standing silently. My heart was clawing at the thought. She was ready to shower me with material goods of any scale, but she was unable to give me the most important thing: basic respect for my personal boundaries and pride. I spent my first night at the Xingxing Villa in a state of ecstatic excitement from the unfamiliar luxury, not closing my eyes for a long time, while Liu Ruyan sat patiently with her, lulling her to sleep with children's stories, and I settled down on the sofa in the empty living room. Looking through the panoramic glass at the night lights outside, I felt movement nearby as Liu Ruyan approached, handing me a glass of cool water, saying that she was tired today. I mechanically took the water, trying not to even look in her direction, while she silently sat down next to me on the sofa. Understanding my inner resistance, she quietly said that she understood everything and was not going to force things or pry into my soul, sincerely hoping only that over time we would become a real support for Xingxing, but my eyes still did not believe her words. Her gaze was frighteningly serious, devoid of falsehood, but the deep splinter from 5 years ago sat too firmly to be pulled out by simple promises, so I silently got up and went to my room. Just as I was about to close the door, I heard her quiet call from behind me, "We are husband and wife now." I froze on the threshold and turned around. Her cheeks were slightly pink, and in her eyes there was an uncertain embarrassment that made me automatically touch her outstretched palm. The meaning of her words was crystal clear, but my wounded heart categorically refused to step over the grievances of the past in a hurry, and having made it clear that I needed time, I saw her understanding nod and disappeared behind the door. Lying in bed in complete darkness, I listened to the even breathing behind the wall where my daughter slept and swore to myself that despite all the falseness of this marriage, I would cling to her well-being with my teeth, when suddenly this silence was broken by a sharp phone call from an unfamiliar number. When I clicked on the screen, I heard an unpleasant, shrill female voice that immediately called my name. The caller introduced herself as Liu Jiru, Liu Ruyan's sister, and sarcastically asked me if I wanted to know the true background to those long-ago events, causing my fingers to grip the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The realization that this crazy woman who had once drugged her own sister had contacted me again made me go cold with rage, and I spoke in a whisper, mortally afraid of waking Xingxing, who was sleeping in the next room. Liu Jiru's voice dripped with venom as she began to relish the details of that fateful evening, sarcastically asking if I even understood what kind of drugs she had been given. Initially, this insidious plan was prepared for a completely different person, but everything went awry due to the stupidity of the perpetrators. She cynically stated that I still believed that Liu Ruyan abandoned me herself, although in fact the child simply became an obstacle to her career plans and attempts to take over the family business, causing the fire in my heart to flare up with renewed vigor. The thought of telling this creature everything burned inside because Liu Ruyan herself had become a victim of dirty intrigues, but anger only clouded her eyes. Reason told me that Jiru was deliberately provoking me into a scandal with my wife, trying to destroy the fragile semblance of peace in our family, and I tried to control myself. Having coldly thrown into the phone that I knew Liu Ruyan better than any parasites like her and would not allow anyone to ruin our lives, I heard in response only a ringing, vile laugh. She mockingly advised me not to have any illusions about my sudden marriage, reminding her that her sister now controls the billions of the Liu Corporation, and that I am just the owner of a shabby eatery. Jiru warned that when the president gets tired of me, they will throw me in the trash, simultaneously threatening to cause problems with the fire inspection for my restaurant. She asked me sarcastically if I would be able to stay on my feet if she made just one phone call to the right people. These words made the ground fall out from under my feet, because this wretched little restaurant was the only source of survival for me and Xingxing, the registration of which took months of nerves, and although there were no violations there, the corrupt system could devour me in no time. Jiru's voice sounded triumphant. She demanded that I become her spy inside Liu Ruyan's company, that I leak corporate secrets to her under the threat of destroying my business and the child's peaceful life, and I was already about to curse her out. At that moment, I heard the rustling sound of footsteps behind me, and turning around abruptly, I saw Liu Ruyan in light silk pajamas. Her loose hair fell over her shoulders, and her face didn't have the usual icy mask, only a soft drowsiness and anxiety from the fact that my muffled, angry whisper had woken her up in the middle of the night. Looking at me anxiously, she quietly asked what was going on and who I was talking to at such an hour. I immediately pressed the end button and threw the phone on the nightstand, breathing out the caller's name. It was Liu Zhiru. Liu Ruyan froze, and I added that I had sent her to a certain address and would not allow anyone to lay a finger on me or Xingxing, no matter what it cost me. Having hidden the device in the pocket of my trousers, I exhaled heavily the remaining air. Liu Ruyan came closer. Her movements were cautious, but a storm of suppressed emotions could be seen in her eyes, and I nodded briefly in confirmation of my words. There was no point in hiding the truth. I conveyed the essence of the threats regarding blackmail and attempts to undermine my case, causing Liu Ruyan's face to instantly darken with anger. Fidgeting with the silk collar of her pajamas, she muttered through her teeth, "Did she say anything else?" I shook my head, deciding to keep silent about the dirtiest details about Xingxing so as not to hurt her further. At that moment, I clearly understood that despite all the past grievances, her return and current desperate desire to be close meant much more to us than I tried to admit to myself, and Liu Ruyan, without further inquiring, simply stayed close. There was a short ringing silence, after which she spoke again. "Don't worry about Liu Zhiru, she simply doesn't have time to ruin our lives right now, and she wouldn't dare harm you, and I'll take care of all the issues with your past conviction. I promise it's nothing," she said, making me freeze in surprise. I never expected to hear something like this from a person whom I had always considered a cold egoist, but now the familiar image was bursting at the seams, although I had only said out loud that there was no need for her help. Having declared that I was used to managing on my own and didn't want to be indebted to her, I reminded her that this whole farce with the marriage was started solely for Xingxing's sake. But Liu Ruyan ignored my words, took a step forward, and looked up at me. "Gu Wanchuan," her voice sounded soft and inescapable. "We're husband and wife now, which means all your problems automatically become mine, and I don't care what you say because I'll deal with that crazy Liu Zhiru myself, so take a deep breath and forget about everything," she said with such ironclad confidence in her eyes that I felt uneasy. My heart literally sank from the internal tension, and at that moment I completely forgot what exactly I was supposed to answer her. This awkward pause was suddenly broken by a child's cry coming from the second floor. "Daddy, Daddy." My heart sank somewhere down from fear for my daughter. I ran upstairs as fast as I could, and Liu Ruyan was right behind me, and when I opened the door to the nursery, we saw a frightened Xingxing sitting in the middle of the crib. Her tear-soaked face twisted, her little hands clutched her favorite toy bunny, and her trembling voice sang out, "Daddy, I'm so scared. I woke up and you weren't here." "Baby, don't be afraid, Daddy is here," I breathed out, running to the bed. I instantly picked her up in my arms, holding her to my chest while her small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Xingxing buried her face in my shoulder, still sobbing, and Liu Ruyan quietly walked to the head of the bed. Her gaze softened beyond recognition, and she gently stroked the girl's back, reassuring her. "Star isn't afraid, Mommy is here too, it's just Daddy who's gone away for a while," causing the little girl to raise her tear-stained head in surprise. Staring at Liu Ruyan with her large, moist eyes, she asked naively, "Mom, are you going to sleep with us now? I've seen in books that normal children's moms and dads sleep together." Liu Ruyan's body tensed for a second at these words. But then she nodded almost imperceptibly, answering in an unusually gentle voice, "Of course, Mommy will stay overnight with Star today," which left me in complete shock. Considering how focused she was on work and business even at night, her willingness to lie down next to her child seemed unreal. Liu Ruyan carefully laid the baby down, covered her with a blanket, and began singing a quiet, soothing lullaby to which her daughter's eyelashes quickly grew heavy and closed. Frozen in the doorway, I watched this scene with bated breath, feeling the long-awaited warmth spreading in my chest. Now Xingxing had a mother who could be there, and I would no longer have to carry everything alone. Liu Ruyan rose carefully and motioned for me to go out into the hallway so as not to wake the child, and we quietly walked down to the dimly lit living room, where only the silvery moonlight flooded the spacious floor. Leaning her back against the sofa, she said with icy contempt, "That crazy Jiro has completely lost her mind and is jumping over her head, but I have already alerted security, and if she touches any of you, I will destroy her without hesitation." I silently sank into the chair opposite, feeling extremely uncomfortable. All my life I had been accustomed to protecting my daughter from any troubles, and this sudden alien shield over our heads seemed wild and unusual. Gathering my courage, I finally asked the question that had been tormenting me for a long time. "Back then, 5 years ago, were there really good reasons to throw me out of life and leave a child at my door?" She sighed heavily and her voice sounded hoarse and broken. "Jiro went too far back then, threatening not only to take over the company but also to destroy Xingxing, and I simply had no choice by giving her to you. I knew for sure that you, as the most honest and kind person in the world, would save the girl, and I myself returned only to end this war and protect us all." The pieces of the puzzle finally came together to form a single picture, erasing years of resentment. It turns out she didn't leave us of her own free will, and all this time I had hated her bitterly in vain, and tears of remorse involuntarily welled up in my eyes. Noticing my embarrassment, Liu Ruyan suddenly smiled sincerely. For the first time in a long time, I saw her smile not as a mask, but as a living and incredibly beautiful one, illuminating her entire face, after which she quietly said that the worst was already behind her. Her gaze made me feel uneasy, and I quickly looked away, muttering that it was already late and that tomorrow I would have to sort out the company's affairs, to which she only nodded silently. As she was leaving for her room, she suddenly froze at the aisle and turned around with a question, "Thank you," which left me dumbfounded. "Thank you for raising her to be such a wonderful person, and thank you for agreeing to give us a real home." Her soft voice struck straight to my heart, making me clench my fists to hide the tenderness that washed over me. Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared behind the door of her room, and I was left sitting in the darkness of the living room, feeling like a boy with a frantically pounding heart. The next morning, I woke up to an unusual silence and discovered that Xingxing was no longer in bed. I quickly threw on some clothes and went downstairs to find a surprising sight. My daughter was sitting at the dining table, diligently using a spoon in a bowl of porridge that Aunt Zhang had prepared, and Liu Ruyan was sitting opposite her. While sipping coffee, she simultaneously managed to look through work documents and carefully wiped the child's dirty chin with a napkin. "Daddy, good morning," Xingxing yelled when she noticed me on the stairs. Interrupting each other, she rattled off that Mom had promised to first take them to the amusement park and then definitely stop by my restaurant, which left me completely stunned. Turning my shocked gaze to Liu Ruyan, I saw her nod affirmatively and smile slyly. "That's right, today I had a free day, so I decided to give us a real family day off." I washed up in no time, joined them at the table where Aunt Zhang immediately handed me a bowl of porridge, and looking at this idol, I caught myself thinking for the first time that we really were like a family. The walk through the park flew by in a flash, with Xingxing holding both of our hands tightly, constantly pointing to passing clouds and demanding cotton candy as we walked along a picturesque lake where white swans swam in pairs. Noticing the birds, the daughter whispered excitedly, "Mom, Dad, look, they always swim together just like us," causing Liu Ruyan to blush deeply and adjust her hair in embarrassment. We soon arrived at my restaurant, and when Lao Zhang brought out the orders from the kitchen, he almost dropped the tray, staring at the three of us with wide eyes. "Boss, is that Mama Xingxing? What a beauty," to which I only smiled sheepishly and nodded. Meanwhile, Liu Ruyan glanced around the cozy dining room, approached the counter, and seeing the menu on the wall, asked warmly, "Spicy chicken and signature tomato and egg. You haven't changed anything in the recipe in all these years." Having received my proud affirmative answer, she asked Lao Zhang to quickly prepare these dishes for us, and we settled down at our favorite table by the window. Xingxing immediately began to boast to her mother about her childhood memories of helping me wipe the tables, and Liu Ruyan stroked her head with affection, listening to every word. When our hot dishes were served, Liu Ruyan was the first to try a piece of chicken, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction, and she confirmed, "It tastes exactly the same as 5 years ago," and the little girl happily added that her father's cooking is the most delicious in the world. Sitting in the noisy hall of my favorite restaurant, surrounded by the aromas of spices and home-cooked food, I looked at my loved ones laughing around me and felt absolutely happy. This entire long, nightmarish journey, all the humiliation and suffering have finally paid off 100-fold. We were about to leave when suddenly the phone in Liu Ruyan's pocket vibrated sharply, breaking the silence. As soon as she answered the call, her face instantly turned leaden. What do you mean? Jiro came into the office and started causing a ruckus. Okay, I'll be right there. After hanging up, she looked at me guiltily and quietly said, Sorry, there's a force majeure at work, I need to go urgently, to which I calmly nodded, promising to bring the child home safely, after which she tenderly kissed Xingxing on the top of her head and quickly left. Returning to the villa and stepping over the threshold, I was surprised to find 3 maids in the hallway, surrounding a mountain of huge cardboard boxes. These were the clothes and accessories Mr. Liu had asked me to prepare for Xingxing and me. He said my old clothes might not be enough, so Zhang Jai had bought some for us. When he approached and smiled, I was stunned. I opened the box and looked. It contained all the brand name clothes, as well as toys and snacks for Xingxing. My heart warmed. Even though Liu Ruyan doesn't talk much, he's still very careful. Xingxing immediately spotted the toys in the box. She was so happy she was ready to jump. She exclaimed, Daddy, look, it's my favorite little bunny. How wonderful that I like her. I touched her head and silently wondered when Liu Ruyan would return. Realizing that I couldn't act like a stranger forever, I decided to try to live a good life. Liu Ruyan returned only that night. He looked a little tired. When he walked into the living room and saw Xingxing and me sitting on the sofa watching TV, he smiled and said, I'm back. Yes, I've finished handling the company's affairs. I asked him about it. Yes, Liu Jiru was fired. In the future, he won't be able to do anything anymore. Liu Ruyan sat down next to me. He looked very exhausted on the couch. Looking at him, I felt a slight sadness and handed him a glass of warm water to help him come to his senses. After drinking water and noticing how tired I was after the whole day, Liu Ruyan took the glass, looked at me, and suddenly smiled. Gu Wanchuan, thank you. Thank me for what? I was surprised. I sat down next to him, feeling a little embarrassed. Thank you for being willing to discuss this with me. Thank you for not falling for Liu Jiru's lies. His voice was soft but sincere. I looked into his eyes and suddenly found my courage. Liu Ruyan, even though we married for a star, I think we can still try to live a good life. I know I misunderstood you before, but I'll make it right. Let's take care of Xingxing together. Okay, Liu Ruyan froze for a moment, then his eyes lit up. He lightly tapped his forehead and replied, Okay, let's live a good life together. The star now unites us. Looking at us, Xingxing suddenly laughed loudly and said, Mom and Dad. Will you be like real mom and dad now? Will you take me to kindergarten together? Will you tell me a bedtime story? Liu Ruyan and I exchanged glances. Everyone laughed and I gently touched Xingxing's head. Yes, from now on, her parents would be by her side and would never be separated again. Liu Ruyan leaned against my shoulder. Listen, Gu Wanchuan, it's so wonderful to be with you. These words warmed my heart. I held her hand tightly. The moonlight outside the window illuminated the 3 of us, filling the room with warmth and happiness. I knew there might be difficulties ahead, but as long as the 3 of us were together, there were no problems that couldn't be solved. Daddy, Mommy, I want to sleep, Xingxing said, her eyes turning red. Rubbing her eyes, she yawned. Okay, let's go to bed. I carefully picked up Xingxing and Liu Ruyan followed. Together, we went upstairs and approached the door of her room. Liu Ruyan suddenly stopped. Look at me, I said quietly to Gu Wanchuan, to which he replied with a smile, Good night, good night. Seeing Liu Ruyan go to her room, I put Xingxing to bed, carefully covered her with blankets, and closed the door. Xingxing soon fell asleep with a smile on her face. I sat quietly by her bed, watching her, and in my heart I vowed to protect both Xingxing and Liu Ruyan, giving them a truly happy home.